People often assume the best investment I ever made was Coca-Cola. Others believe it was Apple. Some point to American Express. A few even think Berkshire Hathaway itself was the greatest investment of my life. They're all wrong. My best investment wasn't a stock. It wasn't a business acquisition. It wasn't an insurance company, a railroad, or even one of the billions of dollars worth of shares I've purchased over the decades. The best investment I ever made cost very little money, required no special connections, and was available to me long before I became wealthy. Looking back after more than 70 years of investing, I can confidently say that this single decision influenced every dollar I've ever earned. It sharpened my judgment, strengthened my patience, improved my decision-making, and allowed me to recognize opportunities that millions of other people simply walked past. The remarkable thing is that almost anyone watching this video can make the exact same investment today. It doesn't matter whether you're 25, 55, or 75, the opportunity still exists. Unfortunately, most people ignore it because the rewards don't arrive immediately. They appear slowly, quietly, and almost invisibly at first, but over time they become extraordinary. Tonight, I want to explain why the greatest investment I ever made wasn't a stock and why it may completely change the way you think about building wealth. The investment I'm talking about was investing in myself. When I was young, I didn't have millions of dollars. I wasn't managing a giant conglomerate. I wasn't sitting in an office overlooking Manhattan. I was simply a curious kid in Omaha who loved reading about businesses. I discovered very early that knowledge compounds in much the same way money compounds. Every annual report I read taught me something. Every biography introduced me to a different way of thinking. Every newspaper article helped me understand how businesses competed, how consumers behaved, and how markets reacted to fear and greed. Nobody paid me to study. Nobody forced me to read. There was no teacher assigning homework. I simply enjoyed learning because I realized something most people overlook. The person who understands how the game works usually has an enormous advantage over the person merely participating in it. Over time, I stopped viewing reading as an activity and started viewing it as an investment. Each book became another deposit into an account that would eventually pay dividends for the rest of my life. The returns weren't immediate. In fact, years passed before I noticed any significant results. But once the benefits began appearing, they never really stopped. One of the biggest misconceptions people have about wealth is that rich people possess information ordinary people cannot access. That may have been true 100 years ago, but it certainly isn't true today. The vast majority of what I know came from publicly available information. Annual reports, financial statements, books, newspapers, and shareholder letters. Information was never the problem. The problem was always discipline. Most people simply aren't willing to spend years learning things that don't provide immediate rewards. They want fast results. They want shortcuts. They want certainty. Investing in yourself offers none of those things. Imagine planting a tree. For years, it appears as though nothing is happening. The growth is slow. The progress is difficult to measure. You water it. You protect it. You continue taking care of it, despite seeing very little visible reward. Then one day, the tree begins producing shade and fruit. The same thing happens with knowledge. Most people quit before they reach the stage where their efforts begin producing extraordinary returns. That's why so few individuals truly benefit from self-investment, not because it's complicated, but because it requires patience. When I was in my 20s, I had the opportunity to study under Benjamin Graham at Columbia University. Many people assume the greatest thing I gained from him was a formula for valuing stocks. It wasn't. Benjamin Graham taught me something much more important. He taught me how to think independently. He showed me that markets are emotional. People become euphoric during booms and terrified during crashes. But businesses don't suddenly change their intrinsic value because investors become emotional. That lesson alone was worth millions of dollars to me, perhaps billions. But the lesson didn't arrive because I bought a stock. It arrived because I invested time into learning from someone wiser and more experienced than myself. That's another reason self-investment is so powerful. It gives you access to minds far greater than your own. Through books, lectures, interviews, and conversations, you can essentially borrow decades of experience from people who have already solved problems you're just beginning to face. Most people underestimate how valuable that can be. I consider it one of the greatest opportunities available to anyone willing to pursue it. People occasionally ask me why I still spend so much time reading. After all, I've invested for more than 70 years. I've built Berkshire Hathaway into one of the largest companies in the world. Why continue studying? The answer is simple. Learning compounds. Every year I continue reading, I slightly improve my judgment. Better judgment leads to better decisions. Better decisions lead to better outcomes, and those outcomes compound over decades. I've often said that I spend roughly 80% of my working day reading and thinking. Some people hear that and assume it's laziness. It isn't. Thinking is one of the highest return activities I know. One useful idea discovered during a morning of reading can eventually produce more wealth than thousands of hours spent doing low-value activities. That's not an exaggeration. It's happened repeatedly throughout my career. The greatest investment I ever made wasn't Coca-Cola. It wasn't Apple. It wasn't American Express. It was building a mind capable of recognizing opportunities when they appeared. Everything else simply followed from there. One of the greatest advantages of investing in yourself is that nobody can take it away from you. Markets crash, businesses fail, real estate prices decline, currencies lose value, entire industries disappear. But the knowledge you've built remains. Your ability to analyze businesses remains. Your understanding of human behavior remains. Your judgment remains. During difficult periods in the market, investors often panic because they don't fully understand what they own. They depend on experts, television commentators, or social media personalities to tell them what to think. I never wanted that dependency. I wanted confidence that came from understanding, and confidence only comes through preparation. When I invested hundreds of millions of dollars during financial crises, I wasn't acting bravely. I was acting based on knowledge accumulated over decades. I had spent thousands of hours studying businesses, reading financial statements, and observing market psychology. That preparation allowed me to remain calm when others became emotional. Most people admire confidence, but they misunderstand where it comes from. Confidence isn't pretending to know everything. Confidence is knowing you've done the work. Investing in yourself creates that kind of confidence. It allows you to think independently and make decisions without constantly seeking approval from others. Another reason self-investment produces extraordinary returns is because it improves every area of your life. Better communication skills improve relationships. Better financial knowledge improves decision-making. Better emotional control reduces costly mistakes. Better understanding leads to better opportunities. Early in my career, I realized I was terrified of public speaking. I could read annual reports for 10 hours without becoming tired, but standing in front of a room full of people made me uncomfortable. I knew that weakness would limit my future, so I invested in a public speaking course. It cost me about $100. At the time, $100 felt significant, but looking back, it may have been one of the highest return investments I've ever made. Learning how to communicate changed my confidence. It improved my ability to negotiate, explain ideas, and build relationships. Those benefits compounded for decades. Sometimes the best investments don't look like investments at all. They're books, courses, experiences, or skills that gradually transform who you become. And when you become better, almost every result in your life improves as well.
People frequently ask what they should study if they want to become successful investors. I always give a similar answer. Study businesses, study psychology, study history. Most investing mistakes don't happen because people can't read balance sheets. They happen because people can't control emotions. Investors become greedy when prices rise. They become fearful when prices fall. They follow crowds. They chase trends. They abandon plans. Human behavior has remained remarkably consistent for centuries. That's why studying history is so valuable. It teaches humility. It reminds you that bubbles existed long before cryptocurrencies. Panics existed long before social media. Speculation existed long before smartphones. The tools change, but human nature rarely does. Understanding this provides a tremendous advantage. You stop reacting emotionally. You stop believing every new trend changes the rules permanently. You recognize patterns. You become more patient. Better investing often has less to do with finding superior opportunities and more to do with avoiding foolish decisions. And avoiding foolish decisions becomes much easier when you've invested years understanding how people behave under pressure.
One thing I've noticed over the years is that people are willing to spend enormous amounts of money improving their lifestyles, but very little improving themselves. They'll finance luxury cars, they'll upgrade houses, they'll purchase expensive gadgets, but they'll hesitate before buying books, attending seminars, or learning new skills. That has always seemed strange to me, because material possessions eventually depreciate, cars become old, electronics become outdated, fashion changes, but skills appreciate, knowledge appreciates, wisdom appreciates. The more you learn, the more valuable you often become. The interesting part is that the market tends to reward specialized knowledge disproportionately. One useful insight can generate opportunities worth far more than years of ordinary labor. That's why I consider learning to be an investment rather than an expense. Every dollar spent improving your ability to think has the potential to pay dividends indefinitely. Few assets offer returns like that. I've spent decades watching people search for the next great investment. They study charts, they follow analysts, they monitor economic forecasts, they look for hidden opportunities. Meanwhile, the greatest opportunity available to them sits largely ignored: their own mind. Imagine spending 10 years becoming slightly better every single day, reading consistently, improving communication skills, learning about businesses, studying psychology, developing patience, understanding financial statements, building better habits. Those improvements may seem small individually, but collectively they become transformative. Most extraordinary outcomes are simply the result of ordinary actions repeated consistently over very long periods. That's true for money, it's true for relationships, and it's certainly true for knowledge. The best investment I ever made didn't appear on a brokerage statement. It appeared gradually in the quality of my decisions, and over time, better decisions changed everything. As I grew older, I began appreciating another benefit of self-investment. It creates independence. People who continually learn become less dependent on trends, opinions, and external validation. They trust their own judgment because they've spent years developing it. That's incredibly valuable. Markets become noisy, news headlines become dramatic, predictions become contradictory. But individuals who have invested in themselves possess something others lack: perspective. They understand that temporary events rarely change long-term realities. They understand that uncertainty is normal. They understand that successful investing requires patience. Those insights don't arrive overnight. They emerge slowly from years of learning and reflection. And once they become part of your thinking, they influence every important decision you make. One of my favorite ideas is that you should try becoming 1% better every day. It sounds insignificant. Most people dismiss it because they want dramatic transformations. But compounding doesn't work dramatically at first. It works quietly. Small improvements accumulate. Better habits accumulate. Better decisions accumulate. Eventually, you become someone entirely different from the person you were 10 years earlier. That's exactly what happened to me. I wasn't born understanding businesses. I wasn't born understanding markets. I simply remained curious. I kept reading. I kept asking questions. I kept learning from mistakes. And over decades, those tiny improvements compounded into extraordinary results. Anyone can follow the same process. The challenge isn't intelligence. The challenge is consistency. I often think about people who say they're too old to learn something new. I disagree completely. Curiosity doesn't have an expiration date. I've met individuals in their 70s who transformed their finances by simply becoming more knowledgeable. I've met retirees who discovered investing later in life and dramatically improved. their situations. The human mind remains capable of growth far longer than most people believe. The moment you stop learning, you begin limiting your future, and limitation is expensive. Every skill not developed represents opportunities never recognized. Every book not read represents lessons never learned. Every conversation avoided represents insights never discovered. Self-investment expands possibilities. That's why I believe it's the most powerful investment available. Looking back, I don't remember the exact price I paid for every stock. I don't remember every quarterly earnings report, but I do remember the habits that changed my life: reading daily, thinking independently, studying businesses, learning from mistakes, improving communication, building patience. Those habits created opportunities that eventually translated into financial success. But even if they hadn't produced money, they still would have been worthwhile, because self-investment improves your quality of life. It improves confidence. It improves relationships. It improves decision-making. It allows you to approach challenges with greater understanding. That's a return that extends far beyond investing. So when people ask me what the greatest investment I ever made was, I don't mention Coca-Cola, I don't mention Apple, I don't mention Berkshire Hathaway. I tell them the truth. The best investment I ever made was investing in myself, reading books, learning continuously, improving communication, building judgment, developing patience. Those investments cost relatively little money, but they paid returns for the rest of my life. Stocks fluctuate, businesses change, markets become volatile, but the knowledge you build remains yours forever. And if there's one lesson I hope you remember from this conversation, it's this: before you invest in the stock market, invest in the person making the decisions, because the quality of your future will almost always reflect the quality of your thinking, and improving your thinking may very well become the most profitable investment you'll ever make.